everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Maria. I'm still pretty new to booktube, but I do have quite a few videos posted already, so I'll link some of those in the description box below. But this week's video is going to be a weekly reading vlog, so I'll just go through all of the books that I'm going to be reading this week, give you some updates, and then give you my final thoughts at the end. So I have quite a few books actually on my radar this week and a few that I have to get to. First one is a buddy read that I'm doing with a few people on Instagram. So it's called A Botanical Daughter. It's technically a horror book, and it's a bit of a strange setting. It's basically centering this person who is interested in horticultural society, so plants and things like that. He finds this fungus and it's showing some sort of life form, and he tries to make it into a living being, and I'm guessing that the horror kind of goes from there. So a little bit different for me. I'm not really a big horror reader, but this one sounded interesting, and as I say, I'm doing it as a buddy read, so that'll be a fun one anyway. The next one you probably have heard of, it's Lightlark by Alex Astor, and this one centers around, there's basically 6 realms, but every 100 years within those realms an island appears, and the rulers of all the 6 realms have to go to that island, compete in these games, and in order for their realms to survive, one of them needs to die. That's kind of the only premise I know about this one. I've heard that it is quite a good romantasy. I've heard that the banter in here is quite good, that the tension in here is quite good. I'm guessing it's enemies to lovers as well. So looking forward to that to kind of break up the horror as well. But yeah, it's one that's been on my radar for quite some time, so happy to be finally getting to it. And then the last one I'll be reading is actually Dune by Frank Herbert. I've left the dust jacket upstairs, but this is the Waterstones edition, so it does have some nice sprayed edges as well. So this one I'm actually around 10% in so far. I started it last night and I'm pleasantly surprised with the writing style so far. I thought it was going to be a lot more dense than it is, but it's really approachable. It's the first science fiction I've ever read, or as far as I know, the first book that's categorized as a science fiction that I've read. And so far it's been easily digestible. You know, there's nothing too dense in there. The writing style isn't too dense. It's been really good so far. So I'm interested to see where this one goes. I don't know a lot of the premise of this one other than basically there's these kingdoms that are traveling to the planet of Arrakis, and it's centering around this drug called spice, which I believe is quite covetable, and you know, you can make quite a lot of money from it. Whoever kind of manages that drug rules the kingdom. So yeah, so far that's all I really know about it. I'm trying to go in a little bit blind. I haven't watched the movies or anything, so I don't have an idea of what's going to happen. Excited to get to this one, excited to read something that's a little bit different for me, and as I say, so far so good. So yeah, I'll give you an update when I've read a bit more. So just jumping on to give a quick update on this vlog. It's been a few days since I done an update. So over the weekend was my husband's birthday, so we had a bit of a party for him, so I was pretty much preparing for that all of Saturday, and then on Sunday I was puppy sitting for my sister, which I did bring my book with me to read, but to be honest I just wanted to spend a lot of time playing with the puppy, so I didn't get a lot of physical reading done over the weekend, but I did manage to listen to quite a lot of my audiobook, and the main audiobook that I'm listening to is Lightlark by Alex Astor. I think I did give you a quick synopsis on this one. It basically follows our FMC Isla, who is the queen of the wildlings, or the heir to the wildling realm, and essentially there's 6 realms who need to fight on this land called Lightlark, which only appears once every 100 years. And basically for the realms to survive, they need to kill off one of the rulers. So that's kind of the initial premise of this one. Isla goes in, you know, we've been told that she's had years of training, and we're told that her power is seduction. That's the power of the wildlings. Isla is going to try and use that to her advantage, but she's also been training training in terms of sword fighting and things like that for her whole life. So I managed to get to around 90% of this one. Yeah, not too long left on the audiobook, around an hour or so. I don't think my feelings will change too much on it, but basically at the moment I am feeling a little bit meh about this one. I feel like it's very tropey, and that's not always a bad thing. You know, I read a lot of books that are, you know, filled with tropes, but the execution in this one is just falling a little bit flat for me. I do feel that the characterization and the world building again isn't very in depth. It could be quite convoluted, you know, in terms of there being 6 different realms with 6 different magic systems and things like that. It could have been a lot more in depth, but for me it is just falling a little bit flat. It is a YA novel, so that could be partly to do with it. However, on the same hand with saying it's a YA novel, there are a few scenes in here that I would definitely say wouldn't be appropriate for 12 to 14 year olds. Above there probably, but 12 to 14 year olds is probably too young to be reading some of the scenes in here. I just think that it is quite a simplistic writing style, which again, because it's YA, probably fits that age range. So there's not too much of a convoluted magic system. It doesn't seem extremely imaginative, which, I mean, I could never write a book, so this is from a very non-judgmental standpoint, but you know, we've got wildlings, sunlings, moonlings. You know, it's not very imaginative in terms of the naming conventions, and in terms of the magic systems it's actually quite confusing as to what those are and the type of magic that people have. From that standpoint, I'm definitely not enjoying it as much as I probably would have liked to. It does sound like it's going to be right up my street, but I think for me it's definitely just either the YA side of it is just too young for me. Excluding that one scene, it may just be a little bit too YA for me. It may just be that it is too simplistic for my taste, and I've read a lot of fantasy romance, so it could just be that it's falling into that because I've read quite a lot up until now. But yeah, unfortunately this one isn't quite hitting. I wouldn't say it's a terrible book. If you haven't read a lot of fantasy romance before, you may actually enjoy this one a little bit more than I am. I think the comparisons that were made for this were the Hunger Games crossed with ACOTAR, and I really wouldn't agree with that. I wouldn't say that that's what this is, and to be honest, I'm not really sure where those comparisons come from, other than it's kind of there's certain games that need to be played for the realms. I'm not really sure where the Hunger Games side of it comes in, because it's certainly not anything like that. It's certainly not a dystopian novel. And in terms of ACOTAR, again, other than there being a broody MMC who we don't really know a lot about, there's nothing that's really comparing it to that. So yeah, unsure where those comparisons came from. And speaking of kind of the love interest, again, there's absolutely no depth. We just have this MMC who's absolutely infatuated with Isla for no apparent reason. I think they'd had 3 conversations up until the point of where he kind of professes his adoration of her. So yeah, that's a little bit confusing for me as well. And there's a lot of telling rather than showing. So that could be why it's falling a little bit flat. So we're kind of getting a lot of, we done this, we then done that, we then done this, and it's like a 2-week span. So we're not really getting involved in the story and the narrative and the action that's happening. We're just being told of it afterwards. So it could just be that that style of writing isn't for me. I would definitely say it's not a terrible book. It's not, you know, the worst written book that I've ever read. Certainly not. It's not DNF material. I probably will still read the second one depending on the ending. It's definitely not anything comparable to the Hunger Games or ACOTAR for me right now. I'll read the end of it. There is still 10% left. There could be something in there that kind of wows me, but I would be surprised if this is kind of anything above a 3-star at this point. In terms of my buddy read, so A Botanical Daughter, so this is the horror novel surrounding the kind of horticultural society. We have a MMC who finds a fungus which is basically showing intelligent life, and essentially that he wants to try and cultivate this into a life form using, you know, a body or something like that. So I'm only about 30% into this one, but what I will say is the writing side of this has been quite funny. You know, there's been a lot of times where I've been laughing out loud at some of the characterizations that the author has used for the characters. I do feel like already, even in such a short time, I feel like I can really visualize them and kind of understand who they are as people. I don't think the horror element has come into it too bad. I mean, there's been a few dark things and a few dark things happening, but it has been kind of laced with some comedy in there, so it's definitely not scary yet, but I'm only 33% in, so there is some time for that. But yeah, up until now, really enjoying it, enjoying the buddy read experience as well. I'll see how this one goes. As I say, it's not my usual genre. Probably take what I say with a pinch of salt in terms of how good it is, but so far I'd say this is probably sitting around a 4-star. It has had some comic relief. I do think the characterization has been really good. There's not really world building, it's set in our world, so there's nothing really to judge there, but in terms of the enjoyment levels, really enjoying this one so far. And then in terms of the one I probably expected to enjoy the least, or at least I expected to struggle with the most, Dune. I'm actually really enjoying this, so I'm around 45% in right now, and honestly, in terms of the plot, I think there's been just a lot of setup, a lot of world building, a lot of helping me understand who the characters are, why they're there, some of the political setup as well. So even though I'm about 40% in, it feels like there hasn't been a lot of movement in the plot, but I still feel like I've got a whole load of information, and it's really helped set up my kind of investment in the characters going forward. So at the 41% point, I do think that we're starting to get into the action, we're starting to get into what the plot will be, and I think that setup has been complete now, so I'm really excited to keep going on with this and to see where the plot goes. As I say, I haven't watched the movies or anything, so I have no idea where the story goes with this one, but definitely really excited about this one because it's a new genre for me. Science fiction isn't really something that I've ever gravitated towards, and mostly because I thought it was something I wouldn't enjoy. So the fact that I'm enjoying this one so much, and it's kind of a classical sci-fi, is really surprising for me. So yeah, really excited to continue on with this one, and I'll give you an update when I've read a bit more. So that's all the updates as of now. Hoping to read a little bit more Dune now, just before dinner time. Have a couple of hours. My husband has went to meet one of his friends, so a couple of hours in the house on my own just to sit down, have a bit of a chill, definitely get a hot drink ready and sit with the pug while I'm reading a little bit, but ready for some relaxation and reading time. Everyone, it's now Sunday, so I just wanted to jump in with a few updates because I have finished 2 of the books for this reading vlog. So the first one was Lightlark, and to be honest, my feelings on that haven't really changed. It probably set it around a 2.75 for me, which is really disappointing. It was one that I thought I would really love, but I just think that the writing style was very YA, very simplistic, and that's not to say it was bad, it was just maybe a little too young for me. I just thought some of the aspects of the storytelling, of the characterizations and things like that just weren't as in-depth as I would normally like them. So yeah, it wasn't a terrible read, it wasn't a terrible book at all, but it just certainly wasn't for me. I wouldn't really recommend that one if you're someone who reads fantasy romance quite often, you've read quite a lot from that genre. This one will probably seem, as I say, a little bit lackluster for anyone who's been reading it for quite some time. So yeah, unfortunately Lightlark wasn't a great start, but I did also finish A Botanical Daughter by Noah Medlock. So this one was my buddy read with a few girls on Instagram, and it was set up as kind of being a bit of a horror novel, but I'll be quite honest, it kind of felt a little bit more cottagecore. I mean, there was some murders and things like that in there, so there was definitely some dark themes, but it was almost almost a cozy read, which is kind of very strange considering this was supposed to be a horror novel. But I do agree with what I said before in terms of the writing style, the characterizations. I really enjoyed the characters. I do think even though they were maybe caricatures because of the story and the setting, I do think that they were still quite fully fleshed, and I did get to understand who the characters were, their motivations and things like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, really enjoyed the writing style, enjoyed the story. I'd say for me it was around a 3.5 because other than kind of the main plot in there, which is hard to kind of say without giving some spoilers, there wasn't a lot going on, and I did find it difficult to motivate myself to pick up this book. When I was reading it, I really enjoyed it, but as soon as I sat it down, I kind of forgot about it. So that's why it sits at a 3.5 at the moment, just because even though it was good while I was reading it, it was maybe forgettable. No, really enjoyed that one. I'm glad I read it. It is a bit out of my comfort zone, so again, take what I say with a pinch of salt. I would say that it was a bit more cottagecore cozy than with like a dash of horror in there rather than a horror genre. And then as for the last one I'm reading for this vlog, Dune. So I've got about 100 pages left of this now, so we've had some really nice weather, so I've been just sitting at the back, just listening to the audiobook while I'm reading along with this one, and yeah, still really pleasantly surprised with this one at how much I'm enjoying it, considering it is purely kind of sci-fi. There's not a lot of romance in here. I mean, there's a very, very tiny bit of romance coming into it now at this like kind of 70 to 80% mark, but even at that, it's quite minimal. It's not romance in the sense of, you know, a fantasy romance or anything like that, but in terms of the plot and the development and the characters, I'm just really enjoying how the story's going. There's enough going on to keep me interested, to keep me intrigued. When I'm reading it, you know, I'm fully immersed in it. I could sit and read it for quite some time. I didn't find myself getting too bored with it. I will say that there's some perspectives I prefer than others. Our main character, kind of Paul Atreides, and his mother's perspectives, I do enjoy that narrative and that story a lot more than that of the Harkonnens. Now the Harkonnens are kind of their enemy, and when I'm in their perspective, I'm enjoying it in terms of getting some of the information and moving the plot forward, but I just want to kind of get back into Paul's perspective and Jessica's perspective to see what's going on. So yeah, really interested just to see how this one ends. As I say, I'm around 70 to 80% now, and I can see I thought this was a bit of a more standalone with the rest of the series kind of being optional, but I may have been mistaken with that. I do need to look that up to see, is this going to end on a cliffhanger, because I wasn't aware that it would. But as I'm sitting at kind of the 80% mark, I'm thinking, where is this going to go and how is this going to conclude? Other than some of those perspectives being a little bit slow, the rest of it's just been really immersive, really great writing, really great storytelling. It's probably sitting at around a 4 to 4.5 for me, but again, that's only because some of those perspectives are a little bit slower just for me and my personal taste. But other than that, yeah, really surprised that I'm enjoying it, and I'll give you an update once I'm done. Hey there, so yeah, I just wanted to come in and round up the vlog. So I've now finished Dune, and yeah, I would say I did really enjoy it. I think it was a little bit slower paced than I'm used to, so it might just be that that's a kind of normal trait within the sci-fi genre, but I did feel that there were some parts that were a little bit slower, some parts where I was kind of wanting to skim through to get to the other person's POV. But other than that, I did really enjoy the story, really enjoyed the characters. I maybe would have liked a little bit more in-depth, not so much character development, because I think there was quite a good bit of character development in there, but just to maybe get to know them more on a personal level rather than their motivations and, you know, the political side of things. But again, I think with it being science fiction, that's just kind of a trait that's probably prevalent within that genre, especially around when this was written. So this was written in around 65, I think it was. Yeah, as I say, did enjoy it, stepped out of my comfort zone, and I am glad I did, because I did enjoy this a lot more than I thought I would. Excited to watch the movie actually, and to see how they adapt the plot in here and how some of the slower parts of it are portrayed, and if they just cut those out and kind of got the one side of it, or the certain POV that I kind of enjoyed, if it's kind of more prevalent there. Dune, I would recommend it if you're more of a romantasy girl like myself. If you read ACOTAR and you enjoyed ACOWAR, enjoyed that political aspect of it, the political houses and discussing how they were going to win the war, you may actually like this one, because that's a little bit more what this is centered around. It's a lot more around the politics and the kind of territories and the power aspect of things. So yeah, would recommend it if you're into that type of thing, but I would certainly say give it a try. It was one that I thought I may not be that interested in, but I've surprised myself with it, so ended up on 4-star for this one, so definitely would say that that's a win. And yeah, that's everything for the reading vlog. So a couple of books that were a little bit meh for me. You know, Lightlark especially was a bit of a disappointment. The Botanical Daughter just wasn't one that I'll probably remember, but with Dune we did have a win. If you've read any of those, I'd love to know your thoughts on them, or if you do have any recommendations for books that are similar that you think I'll either enjoy more or would enjoy just the same, especially in the sci-fi genre. If you've read Dune and you do have any recommendations for books that are similar to that, I'd really love to know those, so put those in the comments below. If you did like this video, I would love if you would give it a like, and if you want to see more from me, do remember to subscribe. Still hoping to do around 2 videos per week with either reading vlogs, book hauls, book recommendations and things like that. So other than that, thanks so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in my next one soon. Bye!